Los Angeles, 1977. Evening. The city blooms with the glow of neon signs, inviting revelry and carefree fun. Young people fill the clubs, dancing to the pulsating beats of disco, while galleries overflow with laughter and joy. But within this crowd, there is one person who doesn't just pass through. He melds into the atmosphere like a ghost drifting past. Rodney Alcala, with his thick curls and charming smile, strolls the streets, catching the eyes of women. He has always drawn attention not just for his confidence, but for something deeper, something mysterious lurking beneath the surface. Rodney's childhood was steeped in darkness. He grew up in a home where cruelty and distrust were the norm. His father, a war veteran, struggled with mental illness, often subjecting the family to torment. As a result, Rodney learned to manipulate emotions, concealing his true intentions behind a mask of charisma. The evening's entertainment seems ordinary, but in the heart of Rodney, something sinister ignites. Every woman he sees is not merely an object of desire but a potential victim. He waits for his chance, ready to do what he needs to. The bustling nightlife of Los Angeles fills the bar with sounds of laughter and music. Emily sits on a bar stool, savoring her favorite drink when her gaze inadvertently lands on a man with thick, curly hair who hasn't taken his eyes off her. He approaches, moving confidently, with a smile that feels both inviting and enigmatic. "Hi, I'm Rodney," he says, extending his hand. His voice is smooth yet persuasive, as if each word carries weight. Emily responds, feeling something fluttering inside her, a mixture of excitement and intrigue. "I'm a photographer. I love your energy. I'm looking for models for a unique photo shoot, and if you're interested, I'd love to take some pictures of you." A slight shiver runs down Emily's spine. "A photo shoot?" she asks, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. "What's so special about it?" Rodney leans in slightly, keeping interest alive in his gaze. "These photos are not just about looks. I want to capture your true beauty, your soul. I believe photography can convey more than just an image. It can reveal who you really are." Emily feels a wave of pleasant tingling wash over her body. "That sounds intriguing," she admits, tilting her head. "Let's do this," Rodney says, quickly pulling a business card from his pocket and handing it to her. "I have my studio at home. What do you say to meeting tomorrow? I guarantee it will be an experience you'll remember for a lifetime." Emily glances at the card, which has his apartment address, then looks back at Rodney. His confidence, coupled with the sensual aura surrounding him, draws her in like a magnet. "All right," she finally responds, though with a hint of caution. "I'll come." "Great. See you then, Emily," Rodney says, stepping back into the crowd, leaving the girl in a daze. The next day, Emily stepped out of the taxi, feeling a flutter of nerves dance inside her. Rodney's apartment looked fairly ordinary, but something about it immediately sparked a sense of discomfort. The door opened, and Rodney appeared with a warm smile. His thick hair fell over his forehead, and his gaze was pleasant, yet there was something undefined about it. "Hi, Emily. It's great to see you again," he said, inviting her inside. The apartment was spacious but dimly lit, giving it a somewhat mysterious atmosphere. The walls were covered with portraits of women he had worked with before. Each photograph looked like a work of art, yet their eyes, seemingly alive, felt as though they were watching her. Emily paused, a slight chill running down her spine as she met their stares. Is this all your work?" she asked, trying to keep calm, but her voice betrayed a hint of anxiety. "Yes, I love capturing moments," Rodney replied, moving closer to her. "Each of these women was special to me. I try to capture their essence, their beauty." Emily nodded, feeling her heart race. "They look alive," she quietly confessed, still gazing at the portraits that seemed to breathe with secrets. "Exactly," Rodney said, noticing her tension. "I always aim to find uniqueness in everyone. Perhaps we can capture your beauty in the same light." Emily felt her anxiety surge again at his words but tried to push those thoughts aside. "I'm ready," she replied, though questions without answers churned in her mind. "Let's get started," he said, leading her to a room where a huge photography studio stood. "First, I want you to relax. You just need to be yourself." Alcala had already prepared for this moment. His gaze was cold and calculating, and an invisible tension hung in the air, gradually filling the room. As Emily stepped inside, she felt anxiety intertwining with distrust. "I've prepared a few new ideas for our session," he continued, noticing how she involuntarily recoiled from a low table strewn with odd-looking props. "Is everything okay?" he asked, tilting his head as if trying to gauge her emotions. "Yes, everything's fine," she replied quickly, though fear still battled within her. Rodney took a step closer, attempting to bridge the gap, his presence growing heavier. "Just relax, Emily. There's no reason to worry. We're just going to take some beautiful portraits." With each word he spoke, she felt the shadow of danger slowly creeping in. But Rodney was so convincing that she tried to believe him, even as something inside her wouldn't let her fully relax. Clutching her belongings tightly, Emily was ready to move on to the next phase. Yet for some reason, her instincts screamed that danger was near. As the photo session began, the mood in the room initially felt light and relaxed. Rodney, smiling and confident, watched Emily as if she were his greatest creation. She sat in a chair, trying to unwind, but a sense of anxiety slowly filled her. "Come on, just smile, be yourself," he said, clicking the camera. His gaze remained warm as he photographed her in casual poses. Emily tried not to think about what was really happening and just enjoy the moment. But with each passing shot, something began to change in Rodney. In an instant, his expression turned cold and piercing, like ice. "Now, do something a little more unusual," he said, leaning slightly forward. "Are you afraid of heights?" Emily, taken aback by his question, laughed nervously, trying to appear calm. "No, of course not. It's just a photo shoot," she replied, even as something tightened inside her. Rodney sensed her discomfort, but it only seemed to amuse him. "Then try something daring. Maybe standing on the edge of the chair." "That seems a bit strange," she said, still searching for the courage within herself. "It's just a photograph, Emily. The beauty lies in the unpredictability. Just imagine you're a real model, not just a girl from the neighborhood." Emily smiled again, though the feeling of fear continued to envelop her. "Okay, I'll give it a try." She stepped onto the chair, but suddenly met his gaze again. He moved closer, his eyes burning with a mysterious yet unsettling energy. She felt her heart racing, as if attuning to her anxiety. "Now, take off your outerwear," Rodney asked unexpectedly, as if it were the most normal request. "It'll help convey more natural emotion." Emily froze, gripped by panic. "But, is that really necessary?" she asked, feeling her knees start to tremble. "Yes, it'll be great, and trust me, it'll make our shots special. Your beauty needs to be unadorned. Just keep what truly reflects your essence," he said, his voice calming, but there was an ominous undertone in his words. She hesitated, all her internal red flags flaring up. "Maybe I'm not ready for this?" she whispered, her inner struggle escalating. "Don't be so modest, Emily. You want true art, don't you? Don't be afraid. I know how to create unforgettable images. It's just a moment." His words sounded as if he were trying to strip away all her reservations. After a brief pause, her heart kept pounding, but something inside told her it was too late to back out. She sighed, removed her outerwear, becoming more vulnerable, and began posing, although a hint of embarrassment played across her face. "Yeah, just like that," Rodney whispered, drawing closer, his voice soft and unnervingly pleasant. "Now imagine you're on the edge of an abyss and what you feel before you fall. What do you think about beauty?" Emily felt the shadow of anxiety cover her again. She didn't know how to respond. Her heart felt heavy, and her mind began to dream of escape. "It's like that moment when everything freezes," she tried to express, but there were notes of fear in her voice. "Exactly. The beauty of a woman lies in her fear, in that eternal moment when the soul freezes. It's the purest form of authenticity. Come on, we're on the brink of a great revelation. He raised the camera, his gaze cold, and it seemed nothing else mattered anymore. Emily felt panic grip her. Something in his words and manner repelled her, but her instinct for survival wouldn't let her simply stand up and flee. It felt like something invisible held her back, and Rodney locked her with a gaze that seemed to penetrate the very essence of her fear. Emily felt fear wrap around her like a dark shadow. Rodney moved closer, his smile morphing into a predatory grin as he touched her shoulder. The contact made her blood run cold. She flinched, as if shocked, feeling panic flood her mind. "Have you ever wondered what your last thought would be?" he asked, his voice smooth, as if he was about to unveil secrets better left unknown. Emily tried to respond, but her voice trembled, unable to form even a word. It's just a photo shoot," she mumbled, trying to convince herself, but with every moment, his gaze grew sharper and terror settled in her heart. Rodney, as if relishing her fear, interrupted her. "Why are you so afraid? It's just a moment, nothing more." His tone was playful, yet danger lurked behind the lightness of his words. "You know, I've photographed women who looked like you. They were all so beautiful, so vulnerable," he continued, devoid of any hint of regret. "But do you know what happened to them? They vanished without a trace. Can you imagine what it's like to become invisible in the last moments of your life?" Emily felt her heart freeze in her chest. Each of his words pulled her further from reality, reminding her that she was not just a model. She had become part of something horrifying. Fear enveloped her like a web, trapping her inside. She tried to get up, but Rodney blocked her escape like a wall. His presence was so suffocating that she could feel his breath, intensifying her panic. Suddenly, he reached for the table and picked up a knife, slowly turning it in the light so that the metal gleamed, promising horror. "Do you know what a person feels in their last moments?" he asked, his voice dull and quiet, ominous like deep darkness. Emily stared at the knife, her eyes filling with tears as despair engulfed her. Every part of her being screamed for help, but she couldn't tear her gaze away from Rodney, his insatiable desire to consume her fear like it was his greatest pleasure. I don't want to," she stammered, struggling to find her courage, but Rodney merely shook his head, as if amused, sighing. "Don't be afraid, my dear. This is just the beginning." The ground beneath her began to tremble, like earth under a volcano. With all her might, she clenched her fists, pushed back, and bolted for the door, catching Rodney off guard, as if he hadn't anticipated her move. She ran without looking back, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind filled with a single desire: to escape to the outside, where his horrifying words couldn't reach her. After Emily slipped out of the apartment, her heart raced like it was bound in chains. She was filled with despair and panic, trying to process what was happening. The street looked familiar, but the world around her felt like a prison cell, where every stranger could be a threat. She turned to a man passing by, but his expression instantly shifted from curiosity to disgust. He stopped, leaning toward her. "You shouldn't be here, girl. Come on, I'll take you away," he offered, but her instincts warned her that he could be just as dangerous as Alcala. Just as Emily opened her mouth to respond, she suddenly heard quiet laughter behind her. She turned around, and her heart sank. Alcala was following her, his face as cold as a statue. He looked calm again, like a predator enjoying the chase. His lack of emotion only heightened the fear that engulfed her soul. A sense of hopelessness washed over her, and her hope for salvation quickly faded. Emily ran as fast as she could, managing to hide in the crowd until she found herself at a police station. She tried to tell her story, but her words immediately hit a wall of disbelief. The officers at the desks exchanged glances as if trying to determine how ridiculous her testimony sounded. "We can't deal with all this. You have no evidence," one of the officers said, closing his notebook. When Emily left the station, despair consumed her. She tried to return to normal life, but the shadow of Alcala continued to follow her, like a garment she couldn't take off. Every sound, every rustle behind her reminded her that Rodney was still here, somewhere nearby. With each passing day, the fear grew. It was everywhere. In the reflections of shop windows, in the crowd that passed by. She often felt his gaze, as if he were watching her from a distance, waiting for the right moment to strike. This fear became her constant companion, and she lost faith in her own strength. One evening, as Emily was walking home, the night was quiet and dark. She was walking down one of the streets when she suddenly felt a familiar chill. The girl stopped and looked back, and there, in the shadows, stood Rodney. This time, his face radiated a deadly stubbornness, causing her heart to freeze. Emily tried to run, but this time he was closer than ever. He stood in the dark alley, watching her mercilessly. A feeling of hopelessness overwhelmed her, like a slowly tightening vice. Her legs wouldn't obey her. She knew it had happened again. He had returned to finish what he started. In the moment when Emily tried to escape, he grabbed her and pulled her into the dark alley. She struggled desperately, but his strength proved too great. The girl couldn't believe she was in his grasp again. The darkness engulfed them, and Emily felt his cold fingers tighten around her. When they finally reached the basement, he threw her onto an old bed, and in panic, she surveyed the narrow, dark room filled with dread. Emily already knew that no scream would be heard. "Relax," he said, his voice calm, almost soothing, but in his eyes burned the fire of a predator. "It won't hurt. Just calm down." His words sounded like a cold sentence, and she couldn't believe this was happening again. Emily begged him to stop, but his ears were deaf to her cries. Desperately trying to break free, she realized there had long been no place for hope in her mind. Every move he made, every glance only intensified her fear. The girl felt her heart beating in time with the relentless silence around her. As the horror unfolded, he was in complete control, and Emily knew there was nothing she could do. At the moment when everything seemed final, she felt the world around her crumble. The girl knew she was left alone with her fear, while Rodney reveled in her torment. After the horrific act was complete, Alcala left her lifeless body on the bed, covered with old sheets. He felt no remorse, only cold determination. In the darkness of the basement, his plan was simple and brutal. He knew that her body no longer belonged to her. In the morning, Rodney went outside and brought with him fresh meat, chopped into small pieces, as if carved from the carcass of a large beast, and laid it on the ground. The dogs immediately howled in excitement, gathering around, their tails wagging, and their eyes shining with anticipation. With powerful lunges, they pounced on the meat, their small jaws crunching under the pressure, releasing the rich scent of blood. The man watched this wild spectacle, feeling both thrill and unease. His four-legged friend's predatory passion was astonishing. Rodney vanished, leaving behind only memories of fear and horror. No one knew about Emily's despair and what happened that night. Her story ended without a trace, leaving only emptiness. And Rodney, enjoying his victory, left the city in ignorance and terror. Like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. Do you check out photographers before booking a photo shoot with them? Remember, sometimes to survive, you need to recognize who your true enemy is and be willing to fight for your freedom, even if it means standing on the edge of the abyss.